I've been reading the Sacred Knowing of Is sample that's on the web. Is it true that you couldn't leave New York at the beginning of your teaching function during 1980 to 1983 until you wrote 3 books, one of which was The Sacred Knowing of Is, which focuses on the spirit world and its inhabitants?
Yes, that's true. That's true. Going back to early 80s. And this was during a time of transition. And it was around the time of my grandmother's passing. This is Gracie's mother. So she was like the matriarch of the family, in whose house there was a spiritualist, say, church of sorts. They did services there. And so, yes, I was given the responsibility to consider my future, and part of that future, according to what the circumstance was to write. That is, to give testimony to my understanding at that point of 3 different very, very important levels of consciousness: self-realization, let's say spiritual foundation, and then the experience of the spirit world itself, which is something other than those two points. The fact of the spirit world was something that was very important to me in terms of what I was raised in. And so, going back to that point, I realized that I had a challenge to unload and confront my knowledge. And so I took it upon myself to get busy. And I did write these 3 books. And I was clear to pass at that point forward to my teaching function beyond New York City.
This book is a book of great importance to me. I sincerely wish that I had read it much earlier in my life when I was suffering in my own personal hell of darkness.
Mm-hmm.
I see this text as a beacon of light for those who are suffering the darkness of low spirits and inherited negative river of blood karma.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, I do have some questions for you today based on what you have written in the Sacred Knowing of His text.
Okay.
Is the Sacred Knowing of His based on teachings of your family?
It is, to some degree. In fact, when I mentioned to my Aunt Gracie that I was writing a book on my experiences regarding the spirits and my battles, in terms of dreams and experiences and visions that I had, and she says, "No, mijo, son, don't do that. They're going to come after you." And I said, "I have to do it. I don't have a choice. I must do it. So they're going to come after me, and I'm going to handle that. I'm going to manage that." See? And so it did happen. It came to pass that I was attacked, in a manner of speaking, and I felt the pain, and I had these battles to fight in my own mind, let's say, and in my soul. Let's use the terminology of the past age, in myself. And so it was a bitter battle, but triumphant victory to be able to get through that and be fearless and conquer over all the fears I had about these so-called powerful spirits and, let's say, darker forces. And so I'm here to tell about it. So I felt even more empowerment, let's say, urge to make sure that I told my side of the story and gave my perception of these things relative to my understanding and experience of the universe as a cosmic or total reality. Yes. Mm-hmm.
How did the Sacred Knowing of His text come to be?
Mm-hmm.
Were there any circumstances that inspired or led you to write this book?
Well, I go back to my grandmother's passing, Gracie's mom's passing. And it seemed that there was a life before that, and then after she passed, because she was very close to me and always supportive of me as a grandson. things changed when she passed. Because she told me to wait when I was a child, I didn't know what she was talking about exactly. She said, "Mijo, you have to wait. Son, you have to wait longer than the others for what you're here to do." And I found that to be pretty nebulous and abstract, at that point. But when she passed, it became very clear to me that what she was talking about was her timing as an empowerment to me. And things started to clear up, because before she died, she said, "I would like for you," because she was dying from rheumatoid arthritis, among other things, and she had a severe case of it, she couldn't walk. And she said, "Mijo, son, see if you can find something, see if you can help those with this kind of problem." And that weighed heavily on me. I said, why is she asking me to find a cure for anything or something to remedy it? Which did occur to me, it did happen to me after she passed. So she appeared to me after she passed in smells. She was just recently deceased, and we were around her funeral at that point, and I went to the store while she was still in a coffin, and I was in a very smelly part of the store. I guess she picked this very, very smelly part to prove to me something. And so I smelled flowers where there were no flowers. I mean, what made me laugh was the fact that I was in this terrible smell area. It was awful. And then I smelled these roses. I said, "Grandma, that's you, isn't it?" And I knew for sure that was the spirit telling me in that way that she's real. And so, and that it was a recognition in that way for me. And so, yes, this thing goes back to that particular circumstance when she passed, and then it was upon me, after that period, it was upon me to write some things, which when I asked Gracie about, she says, "No, you can't do this. It's going to be too much for you." And I said, "No, I have to do this." And so I feel my grandmother put things on me, just as my grandfather on my mother's side put things on me. My grandmother on my father's side put things on me to help further my cause, challenges, and I know she had something to do with that. So for me to prove to myself I had a purpose and a function out here in this world that is very important to other people, not just for myself. So. Yeah, so these are circumstances initially that set it up for me to start doing battle with my own mind relative to these darknesses. Yeah, no. Yeah, it wasn't just like I thought about it. No, it was something that came through the river of blood karma as a positive and let's say challenge of sorts. Challenge. Okay, now in other words, child, you can progress if you meet these very difficult circumstances in your mind. See? Okay.
I do have some specific questions related to what I've read in the Sacred Knowing of His text. In chapter 29, you write, "The spirit world is, awareness of it as it is without a trace of belief. It is what is perceived and known directly as it is given or revealed to the individual." My question is, does heaven, hell, and purgatory exist in the spirit world?
Well, the question really is then, in what way are these things real? Well, they're real to you as mind and spirit. They are real to you because your responsibility as an incarnate being, whether you have beliefs or not, doesn't matter. The fact is, every night you leave your body, you go into the astral domain and astral dimensions of consciousness, and maybe even higher levels of consciousness. We share the whole world of spirit. We share that amongst each other, with one another. We share it as a whole race, as an earth abode for people coming to learn experiences on the planet. So I would say then we share purgatory here, and so it's really an issue of whether the person recognizes that they have an obligation to purify themselves of what ails them, say, through knowledge and wisdom, whether that's spiritual practice or religious practice, it doesn't matter. You have to do something to affect the clearance of these afflictions, whatever they may be. They can be spiritual, they can be psychological, they can be physical afflictions, they can be emotional afflictions. See, so a person has to come to terms with that, and that's basically what the earth is for, and that's why we're here. See, to deal with these things, and each one of us from a certain level of consciousness has to master these things in order to move on in our spirit. Yeah. And if we're talking about purgatory and hell and heaven, yes, they're all here for us. It has to do with our state of mind and our resistance towards the light and or our agreements with the darkness and whatever those things mean in terms of psychological terminology, say, or individual perception of what those things are. Fears as darkness, happiness and let's say bliss in terms of, let's say, heavenly experiences, and then the test of life, which is the purgatory that each one of us is living through as we move through life on a daily, maybe hourly, and a moment-by-moment basis. All those three dimensions are coexisting in our consciousness all the time. So they are real. They are as real as we have experiences that we respond to, happily, depressedly, and or indifferently.
My next question is also from chapter 29. You write, spirit world reality is not the past and therefore has nothing to do with whatever has been heard before. It is present and has all to do with what and who one hears now. My question is, does that mean that all debts are paid? That one will be forgiven for past mistakes or wrongdoings?
What is being said there is that the reality is present. It's now. All of it's here. What you're preoccupied with as a human determines your state of consciousness. You're clinging to things done past, present, or not understanding things done past and present will cause you to be in one state or another state. Purged, right? Self-realized or self-forgiven in a manner of speaking. Then of course you can move on to, let's say, a higher state of consciousness and experience no debts, no fears, no karma. So we're here in karma to transcend karma, right? And the best way to transcend karma is to enter the domain of simple goodness. See? And we're talking about karma not as merely a mechanical cause and effect, but karma in terms of what is given in the traditions in terms of consequence. Say, this is your karma. In other words, this is your creation. Yes, we have a creation, so by the same principle we can create good karma, we can create heaven, depending on what it is we do, with what intention we do whatever we have to do while we're here, to one another, to oneself, say, or to the earth and life in general.
Next question, which is also from chapter 29. You write, thus each spirit being, although freer in many ways than the human incarnate spirit being, is subject to the law of being and return to the bosom of God as pure and total, thus infinite, super-conscious isness. My question, in what ways, other than the obvious being free from a physical body, is a spirit being freer than a human incarnate spirit being?
Well, we are spirits in the body. So in this case, I have to say we are spirits first and spirits last. See? We are part of this intelligence, which is spirit, and it doesn't necessarily mean just an entity. It's not just identification that makes you a spirit. It's part of the nature of intelligence and light, see? Angelic presence, see? And space and heavenliness already present, always present, that enables us to be above, let's say, the tendencies of the earth as a force of gravity, or as a force of darkness and compression and contraction. So we are a combination of both realities, the light and the dark. We are both expansion relative to light and contraction relative to the matter, the material planes, say, density and brilliance. So we have to reckon with that to a certain degree. Say, not all of us have these instincts that are, let's say, learnable regarding the spirit sense of reality, which has to do with intelligence beyond cultural intelligence and conventional intelligence, has to do with spiritual intelligence, which is beyond the point incomprehensible. See? So I can give you particles of information relative to this cosmic understanding called the spirit world of itself, But that's all anybody can actually give you. But the rest of it is really beyond comprehension. We can only share the little bits and pieces we can put into language and formulate for a conversation, or let's say communicational purposes. But there's very, very little we can say about it that is relative to its immensity and incomprehensibility. But in terms of human existence, yeah, we can start seeing things in terms of behavior and neuroses on Earth and human, let's say, imperfection, in a manner of speaking, which from another level is the perfection that you were born into, that you need to make even more perfect. You have to transcend it, see, by understanding, see, and master it as part of your mission on Earth before you can move properly, more stably into another domain while you're alive, another plane of consciousness. If you can let go of the darkness of the past and whatever karma you have or conditions you've created through your ancestry to release, understand, or resolve, or come to terms with and put to rest, we have nothing but potential then as humans relative to the spiritual side of things.
Also from chapter 29, you write, incarnate beings who release their attention to God is infinite awareness itself, transcend their incarnate condition, and are ever more free being.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, how does one begin to release their attention to God is infinite awareness itself?
Well, this requires a certain recognition, see, of what is really behind human nature. What is the essence of human nature? And if we think in terms of, let's say, heart and love, say human nature relative to being a child and having parenting, and seeing the goodness of conditioning, seeing the positive side of culturing, then we'd say, this is good. See, this is positive, upbringing. And as long as there's less violence and hostility and conflict in the process, then of course we're talking about a person that is well on its way to wholesomeness, see, and happiness already as a human being. And higher spiritual understanding, which is not intellectual understanding, then it's relative to being. So that we have to move from, say, the knowledge of the spirit world to the beingness of spirit. See, being spirit. So knowing about it comes, let's say, in the beginning. You need to know about it. See, people have to be educated, because a lot of incarnate beings don't even want to hear about that, because they're so, let's say, programmed to be materialistic as a first stage of their evolution, that they are properly preoccupied with materialism until that falls apart, until they see beyond that. And they see that that's not happiness for themselves. And that is maybe a step along the path to some kind of higher or more deeper, more profound realization, let's say, of what happiness is. And not happy being, that is, not being just happy because you're getting things or having your way, but entering a domain called happiness, liberation of consciousness. So you're happy because you're being. See, period. You're happy because you're here now. You're happy because you exist. See, happiness of itself, then, is really a higher condition to work from. See, we need to be happiness. But to get there, we have to purify ourselves of all the things that ail us. All the afflictions, all the confusion, all the human nature needs to be put to rest. Before it can be put to rest, it has to be understood as a machinery we inherited that we can put to rest by certain means. Certain technology, perhaps, certain therapies, perhaps, certain spiritual practices, perhaps, certain kinds of meditation, or maybe art. You can do it by art. I mean, you can come to terms with the realization of divinity by whatever you're doing, if you're so disposed to do that. You can stop in the middle of driving a car, in the middle of combat, and have a realization of your interconnectedness with the universe. And that's all it takes. It's just the openness and the right conditions in some cases. It doesn't take any training. It takes the right moment. So it is given then, see. And then of course training helps, teachings help, experiences help, see. Wisdom helps, all of these things help. Bondage helps, liberation helps, music helps, art helps, the universe helps, because we are the event. So we need to endure whatever it takes for us to come to the realization of what it is. See, and I use the word God-isness. That means a total, it's not a person, it's impersonal realization. See, it's God, see, the all being, the supreme being, which is what the Buddha realization is about, supreme being, but not necessarily in terms of separation or duality. It's a supreme being relative to transcending duality. So it's not about heaven or hell at that point. It just is what it is. And in the moment of isness, which is the only true ultimate reality, then you have this realization, and that we can call it God, it doesn't matter. You can call it just being okay.
This next quote, which is also from chapter 29, it's sort of a long one. You write, humans are conditioned and educated by and thus bound or attached to the experiences of other beings. Therefore, in order for humans to merely take for granted something inherited or passed down to them, they must rather make the effort to test, know, or experience the truth of anything, everything, and nothing for themselves. This practice of testing or proving truth for oneself is what distinguishes children from adults, adults from leaders, and leaders from masters. Humanity, to truly know itself, must have equal knowledge of both the invisible or subtle and the visible or gross worlds. Thus, each being must know by direct experience what spirit, as well as the matter of life, is, in order to truly know itself, its inheritance and real destiny, and the truth of the universe's God, the infinitely gone. My question is, what about faith? Is it not at all valid or useful in regards to spiritual practice?
Well, we say faith, but more importantly than faith is recognition. We can say it's a form of faith, that you sense that you're connected. So you have a certain degree of certainty, a certain degree of, let's say, understanding already. See? It's not hope. It's just you know that there's a spiritual reality, because we are that. See? It's all around us. Without the spiritual reality as it manifests in the form of what we call space, there'd be nothing. It's the was, it's the is, and it's the whatever else there is. See, the hereafter, so to speak. See? It is the isness. Science is coming to terms with the isness because it is stumped by its pursuit of trying to figure out anything and everything by way of time, space, energy, and matter, see, which is a box. But that's the best the human mind can come up with until they enter either superior consciousness, super consciousness, or they are open to, let's say, higher beings and what they have to say about their reality. See? And I think we have heard a lot from higher beings, but that doesn't make us that yet. So we need to open up to what we need to do to be realized as the higher beingness that each one of us has the potential of. See? So that's our potential. Right? And the sooner we get to the business, as Jesus said, of the Father, whatever the Father is, then the sooner all of this becomes known to us and becomes self-evident to us, becomes obvious to us. We're here in the Spirit, as Spirit, see? Realizing itself as Spirit, see? Despite our forms and our differences and our infinite possibilities, see? As being this, that, and whatever, different from everything else. We have to see things from the heart, that means the whole of it all the time. See? And this is what realization points to in all the schools of Zohar, where everything just stops and it just is what it is. And it becomes the as it is. See? It just is that. Silence, as it is silence, see? As it is emptiness, as it is radiance, as it is the divine, as it is love. See? As it is. It is.
This next quote, also from chapter 29, you write, dreams and reveries often reveal the truth of continual contact with the spirit realms, which all beings have access to or participate in without gap or break. For to die is to make greater contact with the spirit realm, while to live is to appear to make less contact, or rather relatively break conscious contact with the spirit realm. Such is the paradox of incarnation. My question is, do we die in a sense when we're in the dream state?
You could say that. You can say you're dying all the time. See, that we have death as a continuum, and we have life as a continuum, and therefore, in realization, both must be transcended into the is itself. See? See? The no oneness, as I'm phrasing it these days, the no who-ness, see? Spirit itself, the no who. See? See? We are living into death and we are dying into life, see, simultaneously. And we need to see that as a paradox, but also a gift of realization at the same time. See? We are not different from the saints, except that they dared to look closely at what there is that's obvious to them in their practice. See? And they're the extreme scientists, if you ask me a question about that. See? See? They want to look at whatever God is. They want to see the divine. They want to know what it is. They want to taste it. See? They want to realize it. They want to eat it. See? They want to hear it. They want to feel it. See? And this is our right, our privilege as spirits to realize the fullness of our potential here, the bounty given to us. As Jesus said, the kingdom within what? The heart, perhaps. The kingdom within the heart. Who dares to look that closely to realize it and say, they are sure of that, more than what appears and changes before their eyes and before their minds and before their bodies and so on.
Also from chapter 29, you write, the form of certain spirits is a star, a mist, a flame, a ball, an orb, a flash of light, and partial or full body apparition. My question is, how is it determined what form a spirit will show up as? Does it depend on the spirit's level of vibration or that of the being perceiving the spirit as a form?
Both. Both. And so we can say then that it is understood by those who are more in touch with the etheric universe, right? The space universe, see? And the hierarchy of the spirits, or let's say the hierarchy of the angels. Some will call it the hierarchy of the gods and whatever. But all of that is within us. That's the kingdom within, the infinite kingdom within us. What we see without us is a particle of what is within us in terms of what is manifesting what is without us. We see the form out there comes from the formless within that we don't dare to look at ordinarily. The infinite formlessness of itself, also known as pure spirit. Yeah. And we are that, so it has to do somewhat with what we're willing to see, what we have prepared ourselves to deal with in terms of what we can see, if we need to see, what is, let's say, very obvious to others who do not need to see. Not everyone needs to be a doubting Thomas as far as this goes. You can just know your heart and know everything there is to know, in a manner of speaking. Or you can doubt and still need to see, still need to hear, feel, touch. You still need to know. See? You still need to be. See? See? Which is all on the path of, let's say, growing into realization, which then is being silence. Already done, already gone, always here, already gone.
You go on to write, the fact that spirits are a subtle form of spirit and therefore free of physical matter does not limit them in any way whatsoever except as self-consciousness. Having superficial perceptions of self as things and beings limits the scope of spiritual and creative ability. Spirits free of such self-reflecting perceptions awakened to their nature as light awareness are thus free to explore and be space, intelligence, and liberated light. My question is, when one leaves the physical body, whether temporarily, such as in the case of sleep, or for good, when they physically die, are they less self-conscious?
They can be, yes, depending on what you mean by self-conscious. See? Again, we have to go to the individual. If you realize there is no self anyway, then you're already selfless in consciousness. You're conscious of self as selfless. That means open. See? It means radiance. See? You're not limited to image. See? saw it as such, you can use it, but you're not limited to it. See, you see things more from, let's say, a total perspective, or the wholeness of being itself. See? So there's a bigger view. There's the heart view, and then there, of course, it's the limited view. It's the self view. So it's a matter of perspective then. See? So we're already, let's say, selfless. We have always been selfless, but most of us have chosen to survive and relate to one another from the view of selfishness, because that's part of the norm in this dimension, in this world. But it's not truth, but it is the norm to be a selfish person. And we can say that some understandings in terms of spiritual progression would say, well, then the younger souls are those that need to be more selfish, say, in the beginning, and then they learn the limits of selfishness as they progress and unfold and grow up and learn more and become more conscious. And then that falls away for some people. And therefore you find a lot of highly educated people, individuals who have pretty much maximized what the world can offer them in terms of their experience and their pursuit of knowledge and all the rest of that, who go into the monastic life or live a sort of monastic life while they're still in the world, being materialistic, but they still have this enormous sense of spiritual wealth at the same time. So both are what we are. We are all of it. We are not just materialists. We're spirits who are capable of the universe. And that says more than materialism and spiritualism put together. Right? We are giants. We are humans. Few beings. See? That means we are capable of, let's say, divinity, completion. See? Divinity not as being a Superman in a certain physical sense, just being enlightened and sounded, completely okay, here and now, and including everything as part of the process. Everything. Every moment is complete and perfect to itself. Everything is what it is. Yeah. And when that is more or less your function as a heart being, then you just naturally offer, let's say, grace, space to other peeps. Say. Some would say that's then entering the realm of doing things from loving kindness, say, which is a really beautiful phrase. And that's true. It is that, gentle and serene. We can be that because we, as humans, are beastly and animalistic in potential, but we have a heart that is beyond that. See? We have a heart that is higher in nature and more noble in nature than just animal instinct. And I believe that the body is, let's say, an animal begging to be trained to a noble spirit. See? And that's the opportunity each individual has as a spirit in progression, an awakening being, is to bring nobility to human existence in a universal way. See?
For someone who is operating from the self level, can they carry over neuroses related to their physical body once they leave the physical plane?
Well, if we're talking about, let's say, the theory of the river blood works that I put out, yeah, there is continuity. You see it genetically handed down. Right? It's passed down through the line. There are things that people have a predisposition for, obviously, whether it's one form of addiction or whatever. See, all of this is part of the living death, dying into life process that is passed down through, let's say, the family karma. Yeah. And so it's continued in future generations, where we see it as appearing to be brought to life through generation. It's really continuing what others have lived and died as, not just died for, but died as in their suffering. See? And that's passed down, because then we're talking about a psychic factor. Well, grandpa was this and grandma was this, and this is as far as they got. This is who they were. As soon as you start IDing what they were, what they were being, what they were struggling to become, you're passing that karma on to everyone. So we have to get beyond the karma of speech and the speech of karma and get right down to the core, which is heartness, heartfulness itself. Sometimes. Maybe not all the time, because we're in the time-space world, so we have to We have to take care of business relative to the demands of our time, space, energy, matter, existences. But then there's practice and being heartful and being spiritual in the highest sense of the word. That doesn't mean philosophical particularly, but being spacious, being compassionate, see, being open, being radiant beings, celebrating life, not just agonizing over, what we don't have. See, when we don't see the perfection of everything that is obvious for those who can see it, hear and know and feel and be and touch and, sense the reality. Right?
Also from chapter 29, you write, thus a developed or awakened spirit may, if strong enough, manifest to anyone on the physical plane if it chooses to appear in and wear the appropriate garb of relative matter and form. My question is, would an angel appearing be an example of what you're describing?
Yes, that's a good example, right? Because they're coming from no appearance into appearance. And if we're talking about a positive celestial being, then it is the appearance of goodness, see, brilliance, light, and healing, see, and wonder, see, awe, see, positive, see, inspiration then, rather than an appearance which is dark and contracting and fearful and negative in a certain way. You don't want to open, you want to shut down and run and hide and so on. So you have the appearance of darkness and you have the appearance of luminosity or light and inspiration, see, brilliance, awareness, see, wisdom, see. So yes, in terms of the etheric universe, anything and everything happens by appearance, depending on what and who needs to see or perceive whatever it is for their growth, their next step. And usually it's based upon that kind of logic. You see what you're ready to see, even if you don't want to see it. You're ready to see it. You experience what you're ready to experience, even if you don't want to experience it. Who's ready for death? Very few people are ready for that, but you have to experience that, see? Because then that becomes a step on the path of understanding your real nature and what you were born to experience. You were born to experience life, that means death. As steps along the path to realization and zero, heart space. See? Spirit as spirit.
I have one final question from chapter 29. You write, the transcendent truth can only be considered or thought of by the individual through the recognition of a plane of consciousness or degree of awareness. However, neither the assumption of a self-mind nor the mechanics of the intellect or of the universe of themselves realize the transcendent truth of itself. Rather, the spirit faculties of free insight and awakened intuition serve the sacred recognition and spiritual realization of the transcendent consciousness or source of being, which is beyond and thus free of matter, energy, space, time, mind, and being itself. My question is, what is free insight and awakened intuition? Do they or can they occur spontaneously in an individual?
Yes, we can say spontaneously, we can say when you're ready, when you're open to it, under the right conditions. But it's also spontaneous. That means without precedence. It can just happen. See, it has no time. And it isn't in time, but it appears to be in time. So there seems to be a logic to it in some cases. But if the event that we're speaking about happens, then it's not time. It just is what it is. However, and by whatever means necessary, you enter the is as it is what it is. Yeah. And you're here now. Then you're into the obviousness of it. See? You enter obviousness, radiance, which you've never left, because without it you couldn't have a thought without it. There would be nothing without it. But you enter the consciousness of it, see, communion with it. So it's like saying you're not entering anything else. You're just awakening to you, the hue you, the true you, as heart essence, see, isness. Thank you.